Hello, welcome back to my channel if you're new here. My name is Mary and today's video is going to be my wrap up for the month of November. Just like I did the last time I did a wrap up, I'm not going to go into stats or anything because at this point in the year I really can't be bothered with that. I am just going to go through in chronological order. However, I will be starting with my DNFs. That way I don't end on them because that's kind of a sour note to end on. I realized last time I did this. And I don't know when I DNF'd these things. Like, I don't have the chronological order for that because I keep my DNFs separate than the books that I read. I hope that makes sense, but we're just going to jump into the 4 books that I DNF'd in November. Yes, I did DNF a lot. I also read a lot, so I'm very pleased with my reading for this year, but I can talk about that more in a different video. Okay, so the first book that I DNF'd in November is the Book of Cain and Margaret. And this is essentially a bunch of vignettes that all follow characters named Cain and Margaret, but they're not connected. And they're all set at like a Japanese internment camp. I was really interested in this story because it was sort of pitched as like a winding romance between Cain and Margaret. And some of the stories are that way, but a lot of them seem very like folklore inspired and it's very like experimental. And to be honest, I just didn't like it. Like, some of the stories or like sections were interesting and good, but the most that they were was like 5 to 7 pages. And I just didn't like it. I usually do, I've mentioned this before, one of my favorite storytelling techniques is when it's a series of short stories that interconnect with each other. If you think about the movie Love Actually, it's kind of like that. I love that movie because I really enjoy that it's like a bunch of different stories that in the end all interconnect. I think that's very interesting. Examples of that of books that I've loved are Love and Other Stories. Is that what it is? Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward, which I read a couple years ago. And then I also read How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Love that book. The Candy House by Jennifer Egan is an example of this. It's not my favorite example, but it is an example of this. I just didn't like this one. It just didn't work for me. Then I DNF'd All We Were Promised by Ashton Lattimore. To be honest, I don't remember what this is about at all, but it says I didn't like the writing and I was overall bored. So that's my review of that. I'm not going to look up what that's about, but I didn't finish it, so there you go. Then I DNF'd Icarus by Kay Ancrum. This is like a YA book. It was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards, which is the only reason I read it. I read another Kay Ancrum that I remember feeling like I liked overall positive, but I think I probably gave it 3 stars. But this one is about a kid who is in high school and their dad is an art thief and they are also an art thief. And I did not get very far into this one. It just wasn't really my thing. I didn't like the writing style. I didn't care for any of the characters. I just wasn't interested in it, and I was trying to read a lot of things for the Goodreads Choice Awards at that point. I did a whole vlog, but I scrapped it because I didn't end up filming I didn't do it on time, basically. So that was my bad. I'm sorry. But I am going to talk about a lot of those books today. I DNF'd that book. I said I only wanted to read this because of the Goodreads Choice Awards, and then it didn't make it past the first round. That's why I stopped reading it. I was reading it, and then the first round ended, and I saw that it didn't move on, and I was like, okay, I don't care about finishing this then. I did finish some things that didn't make it past the first round, just for clarification's sake, even after I knew that they weren't going to make it because I was interested in them, but this one just didn't work for me. And then I DNF'd The Backyard Bird Chronicles by Amy Tan, which is a nonfiction book, and it's essentially, Amy Tan is a novelist, and she got into bird watching and made a journal detailing the birds that she would see in her backyard. Again, I thought this sounded really like interesting and cool, but it just wasn't very good in my opinion. Like, I just didn't like it. It wasn't doing anything for me. I started reading this on a flight and I gave up. So that's that. Those are the 4 books that I DNF'd this month. Now let's jump into the books that I actually finished. Again, a lot of these were for the Goodreads Choice Award, and the first book that I read in November was After You by Jojo Moyes, which was on my November TBR, so I did read that. I've decided I'm not going to read the last book in the series. This is the follow-up to Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, which is a romance book, like a contemporary romance. These books primarily focus on the female main character. I'm not going to spoil what happens in Me Before You, although you might know. But because of that, we're only following the female main character in the second book. And it just like is an interesting like slice of life about this character Louisa and how she's like dealing with what happened in book 1. But I mean, it was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars. Yep, 3 stars. It was fine. I'm not going to read any more of those books. I just don't, there's a follow-up, like a final one, but I didn't really care that much about this one, so I don't really care that much about the next one. I really enjoyed the first book in the series, but I do see its problematic elements. If you know, you know. Then I read She Regrets Nothing by Andrea Dunlop, which is a like what had like a rich people drama book. And it's about this woman who, I can't remember her name, that's fine. But she, basically her parents are both dead. And at her mother's funeral, I think her second parent who dies, she's like 23. And at this parent's funeral, she learns that she has these cousins on her dad's side that she never knew about before. And they live in New York City. They're all socialites. They're very wealthy. And she basically moves to New York about a year or so after this funeral and like mooches off of them. And then things like, they don't quite go like fully sinister, but there are like sinister undertones. And I just thought this book was really interesting. It reminded me of another book that I read, Social Creature by Tara Isabel Burton, where it's like, it's not as dark as that book though. That book goes really dark. This one does not go very dark. It's more of like a contemporary, but it's like about someone who doesn't belong in this world of the rich and wealthy, but they're like pretending that they do basically. And it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I was like compulsively reading it, which at that point I was reading it as an ebook and that hadn't happened to me in a long time. So I was very pleased with that one. I'm gonna let my dogs in from outside because they're sitting by the door and it's really cold out. Hold on. Sorry if you can hear them running around in the background. They're happy to be inside. Okay, the next books that I read To Sir Philip with Love and To Sir Philip with Love, the second epilogue by Julia Quinn. This is the fourth or fifth book. Fifth? Yes. Fifth book in the Bridgerton series. It follows Eloise, who is the 5th child of the Bridgertons. And these are Regency romances. There's a TV show called Bridgerton based off of it. And in this one, Eloise starts off by sending letters to this guy who was married to her cousin, but her cousin is passed. And then he invites her to come be like he invites her to come meet him because he wants to see if she would make a good wife because he wants a caretaker for his children. To be honest with you, it seems icky. I didn't think I would like this book based on the premise. I really thoroughly enjoyed the like romance of them coming together. And then about the 60% mark, certain things happened that made me like less enthused about it. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. I gave the second epilogue 4 stars. It follows one of the children and her like coming out and courting, I guess, which I thought was fun. The second epilogues are just like really short snippets that are the characters' lives, because like romance books end in an epilogue. So the epilogue is usually like 1 year later when they're married, or like 5 years later when they have a baby, or whatever it is. And then the second epilogues is just like random things throughout their lives, so you get another glimpse of the couple, which I think is cute that she does that. I think she released the second epilogues as like a bonus content at one point. And now they come at the end of the books, but they're still separate on Goodreads, so I log them separately, which is great because it's really good for my reading average. Okay. Then I read The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, which is the second book in the Poppy War series. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Okay, I think I gave the first one 3.5 stars too. I don't love this series the way I wanted to. This is a like military fantasy. So right off the bat, you know that I don't really like battles in books. If you've been here before, you might not know that actually. But military fantasy is not technically for me. And I guess it's not practically for me either. But these books follow Ren, and Ren was a really poor girl in the countryside. And she was living with a foster family, and the only way out of her situation was either to get married, which she did not want to do, or to study and take this test and get into this military academy, which she ends up doing, and it's a very prestigious academy. And so she goes and joins this like army force, and there's all these wars happening, and a war basically breaks out at the end of the first book after the kingdoms have been in like relative peace and harmony for as long as they have been. I don't remember how long it is. And now we're following her with this like troop of specialized powers. The powers come from poppy, or opium. I don't know why I forgot the word for opium for a second, but it's this plant. You know what opium is. I'm not going to explain to you. Okay. But anyways, the powers come, it's like in the form of shamanism and like the gods, which is very interesting. But again, ultimately, it's not something that I'm loving, but I do plan on finishing out this trilogy at some point. Well, I know I only have 1 book left. I was going to say I think it's called, but then I can't remember. So Dragon Republic is book 2. It doesn't matter, but I'll read it at some point and I will let you know how I feel. I honestly feel like the farther away I get from reading these books, I forget what happened in them, but also like I'm pretty solid, I think. So I think if I read it in the next month or 2, I would know exactly what was going on, but I'm worried that if I let it go longer than that, I would need a refresher, and I don't think I would give myself a refresher, meaning I would not reread these probably. So anyways, Then I'm going to talk about all of these together. It might just be 2, actually. I read Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging and On the Bright Side, I'm Now the Girlfriend of a Sex God by Louise Renison. These are young adult books, I guess, about, and they're in the form of a diary. So it's Georgia Nicholson. I loved the movie with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Groom. What is her name? Is it Georgia Groom? I don't know. I know Georgia's the character in the book. Anyways, it's Rupert Grint's longtime girlfriend who he has children with, longtime partner, whatever. But there's this movie, it was on Nickelodeon in the US, I think. I don't know what it was in the UK, but it's based on these books, Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, and I love that movie. So I was very excited to pick up the books. I've been wanting to do it. I read 2 of them. I gave them both 5 stars. It's kind of like a throwaway 5-star for me because it's like, will they ever be my favorite books of the year? No. But did I have like a rip-roaring great time reading them? Yes. So they're about Georgia Nicholson, and she is like 15, I think, 14, 15. It's about her like trying to fit in with her friends, having issues with her friends, having issues with her parents, her younger sister, and how like her baby sister always like pees in her bed. 'Cause she's like 3. I don't know. It's just very funny, very wholesome, very like probably problematic. But again, these came out in the 90s, so I was not a teenager then, but like I was a teenager in the 2000s. So it's like very, I don't know. It scratches that itch for me, I suppose, of like nostalgia, even though I have never read them before. But I do plan on probably reading some more of them maybe at some point, but I had a great time. They're fun. I don't know. I had fun with them. I think if you liked that movie or like if you have an interest in that time period, like I think they're a good time. Then I read Golden Girl by Ellen Hildebrand, which is my least favorite Ellen Hildebrand to date. I think I've only read 2 others, but I gave one of them, maybe both of them 5 stars. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. I know 28 Summers is behind me, and it's my favorite Ellen Hildebrand to date. I don't remember what the other one I read was, but I want to say there was another one, and I gave it like 4 stars. But anyways, oh, there was. It was about sisters. That one was really good. I might have given that one 5 stars too. This one, Golden Girl, is about a woman who is a novelist who dies at the beginning of the book, and she's able to watch her family heal from her death, basically. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was good. Like, it was on the positive side of a 3-star for me. I think I probably rounded up to 4 on Goodreads. Like, I didn't dislike it, but it didn't really do anything for me. That's that. That's really all the opinion I have on that one. But it was fine. It's definitely like they're beach reads. And they're all set in like the Hamptons. Then I read Butcher and Blackbird at the request of my friend Tony. Okay, listen. By Bryn Weaver. This is a serial killer romance. So we follow 2 vigilante serial killers who kill other serial killers, okay? And I don't remember their real names. That's fine. But the female one at the beginning of the book is going after this guy, and somehow he traps her in his like cage where he holds his victims. And so she thinks she's going to die. And then our male love interest comes because he's going to kill this guy. And he comes and sees that the guy's already dead, but she's locked in the cage. So he gets her out of the cage, and then they have this game where once a year they meet up, and they're like given clues as to who the serial killer is. And they have to find the serial killer and kill him. And whoever wins, wins. And then they have a lot of sex, and that's the book. They fall in love, I suppose, but I don't know. I give this 3 stars. I had a great time reading it, but it's not really my thing, if that makes sense. But yeah, did I enjoy it? Yes. I'm not like dying to read the second book, but also, sorry, I'm very sick right now. That's why I sound like this, and that's why I look like this, and that's why I'm coughing. But it was good. Maybe it's like a 3.5 star, because I had a good time with it, you know? I think if this is your thing, I think you would really like it. The writing style really wasn't my thing. And I don't know that dark romance really is my thing. Like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be like, oh my God, 5 stars. I loved this. But maybe I will. Who knows? So anyways, then I read Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew, which I read for the Goodreads Choice Award because it was nominated in the Young Adult Fantasy category. And I don't really remember anything about this. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. Oh, I do remember. Okay, so okay. It reminded me a little bit of Gallant by V.E. Schwab in the premise, but it's this girl whose parents have died and she's inherited this house. And she doesn't know this, but the house requires magic to survive and to keep the wards up, and the wards keep like the demons out. I don't know why this house is kind of a portal to hell. I'm not really sure. But there are these 2 male characters, and one of the male characters is... They're both kids that she grew up with, but one of them is like a British guy whose dad is really wealthy and was like friends with this girl's dad, and he's in on keeping the wards up. And the other one is like kind of an enigma, but he's basically was like almost held captive there as a child. And when she shows up to the house, he's chained to the house. And so she doesn't know why that is. And we're getting his perspective as well. And it was interesting, you know? I didn't have a great time reading this. It does have a bit of a love triangle with the two boys and the girl. And it flashes back to when they were kids and in the present. It's got a bit of a mystery, obviously, because you don't know who the guy is, or like, you know who he is, but you don't know why he's important. And also, he hints from the beginning that he needs her to do some magic to release him from whatever is happening with him. Like, that's like the first thing you learn about him, because you get his point of view too. And so it's like all of that mystery. I think if you read more, if you like YA fantasy stuff, you might like this. Again, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine for me. It wasn't anything like groundbreaking or amazing, but like, I think I would recommend this to the right person. Like, I don't think it was a bad book by any means. I do hate the cover though. I think it's very ugly, but that's between me and God. All right, the next one I read was The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This is a horror book that was nominated this year in the Goodreads Choice Awards. I like this. I gave it 4 stars, I think. It's about this girl who is living with her parents. She's Asian. I don't remember. She's East Asian of some kind. I don't remember if she's like Vietnamese or Chinese or what. But she, basically the eyes is about fish eyes. She at one point, her mom finally convinces her to try a fish eye and she eats it. And then she becomes like obsessed with eating eyes. And she becomes a serial killer kind of based on that. Also, her mom is a really shitty boyfriend who's like this white guy and she hates him. And he's really like fetishizing everybody. And like, I don't know. This book was interesting, and like I liked the body horror of it, I guess. I really did enjoy that. Like, I thought it was a very interesting, I've never read anything quite like it. However, I did think it was quite boring for like the majority of it. So it's definitely slow, very slow. And I don't know, it's not going to be a new favorite. I think I was glad that I didn't, like, I've heard people rave about this book and how great it is. But I didn't want to be, like, so disappointed when I read it if I didn't like it. So I really tampered my expectations. And I'm glad that I did. Because I think I would have given it, like, a 3 or 2 star if I had listened to, like, all the reviews beforehand. Because I've seen now, since, so many, like, glowing 5-star reviews. I've read a bunch of them. And I just, for me, this was a great book. Like, it was good. Maybe it's a 3.5 star. I don't know. I really enjoyed it, though. Like, I would recommend it to you if you like that kind of thing. But it was not a new favorite. Then I read How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. And this is about a girl who's Chinese American, and she is a writer, like a novelist. And when she was a teenager, her sister died in a car accident. That was like a death by suicide with a car. So trigger warning for that, obviously. And the kid who hit her with his car was like a boy in the class of the main character. So she hasn't seen him since then, but one of her books is being turned into a TV series, and he is in the writer's room for that TV series. And so it's about them having to work together after this tragedy has happened, having to sort of not get over this tragedy, but like, nothing I say sounds sensitive. I don't even know how you would like grieve together and like, you don't really get over a loss, do you? But like, you know what I mean? So they have to go through the grieving process of that together, and then they fall in love. And I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. I have seen a lot of mixed reviews, so it probably is not for everyone. I've seen a lot of people say that they don't understand how she could ever, be with him. Oh my God. Okay. I keep bumping into this stupid thing. They don't understand how she could ever be with him after he killed her sister. But here's the thing. He didn't really kill, like, I don't know how to say this sensitively, so I'm not really going to go into it. But like when 2 people go through like a loss like that, and his loss is like, he had to watch somebody die. Like, he had to be responsible for somebody's death. Even though like wasn't his fault, he still has to live with that. And so like, I think overcoming that, it makes sense to me that they would fall in love. Okay. That's all I'm saying. But I love that book. I gave it 5 stars, and I voted for it in the best romance category, in the best debut category. And it might have won best debut. Probably not though, but it might have. I haven't really looked. I looked at the winners briefly to see if I'd read any of them. And I want to say this one was, maybe this one just made it past the first round of best debut. And that's what it was, because it didn't make it past the first round in romance. Anyways, then I read Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. I found this book delightful. I gave it 4 stars. I was nervous going into it because I typically don't like King Arthur retellings, but it's not a King Arthur retelling. He's just named after King Arthur. And it is kind of like medieval fantasy, I guess, but it's mostly like about like parties and goofing off and like being teenagers. And I know that a lot of people probably won't like that because it's not historically accurate, but I thought it was so fun. And Art is gay, Gwen is gay, and for whatever reason, they've been betrothed to each other forever, so they decide to enter into a lavender marriage and like help each other find love with their like perspective, like their chosen suitors. And Art's is Gwen's brother, and Gwen's is this like female knight that's on the scene, very sexy. I thought this book was delightful. I had a great time reading it. I mean, if you like that kind of thing, it was a silly, goofy time. There's nothing like too smutty about it that I recall. Yeah, it's YA, so it's pretty. I remember it being pretty clean. I think there's probably kissing and stuff, but that's about it. But it was a delight. I had a great time, and I'm so glad that I read it. And I would never have read it if I wasn't trying to read everything for the Goodreads Choice Awards. So, anyways, then I read Oath and Honor by Liz Cheney, again for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This was nominated in the audiobook category and in memoir, maybe? But it's about the insurrection on January 6th in 2021 from the perspective of a longtime conservative politician. Liz Cheney, if you don't know, is the daughter of Dick Cheney, who was the vice president under George W. Bush in the early 2000s. And she's a career politician. She's a longtime conservative. This was really interesting. I didn't rate this book. I liked that she read it. And also my favorite part about the audiobooks was that she would reference speeches that people made, and then they would play the actual person giving the speech that they made, which was good. I liked the production quality of that. Like I just really enjoyed that aspect of it. I have a lot of problems with the way that she did this, because she, like, in my opinion, as a career politician, I feel like it is kind of your responsibility. Like, the things that happened kind of are, like, you're more responsible than I am for the insurrection and for things that are going on in Washington, D.C., I would think. But it really felt like she was, like, deflecting her own responsibility for things. I said this when I read, was it Kinstar? Is that who wrote the book that I read about the Clintons? Where he was the journalist that broke the Monica Lewinsky story and then tried to act like, I don't know. I understand that it's news, but he made a big thing about how, like, he never did anything to hurt Monica Lewinsky when he literally did. That was a long time ago that I read that book, but I'm just saying, like, the lack of accountability and stuff like this is kind of what drives me bonkers. I'm glad that I read this book, because I've mentioned before, I don't really love political memoirs because I feel like they're, like, White House memoirs are always the same thing. However, these days, I mean, there's crazy shit happening, so maybe they're more interesting now. I don't know, maybe this is how people felt in, like, 70s and 80s on the heels of Watergate. Who knows, but I read that. Then I read The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, which is the best sci-fi I've read in a long time. So this is the first in a sci-fi series. James S.A. Corey wrote the Expanse series, which I have not read, but do plan on reading eventually. Again, I only read this because it was for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This was not even on my radar, but it's basically about this group of humans who, they already are colonists on another planet, okay? And there's an alien ship that lands on their planet and takes them captive and is basically performing experiments on them. Maybe that's the wrong word, but, like, they all were scientists before, and they don't know who all is held captive when they get to where they're going. And they really don't know what the purpose of their captivity is. And as this book goes along, they're figuring it out. You get some really interesting interactions with characters. They have really interesting, like, relational dynamics. There's also, like, I think it's a spoiler to say, so I'm not going to say, but there's this, like, really bizarre plot twist that happens at, like, the 50 to 60% mark, I think, is when you find out about it. But then, like, the reader finds out about it, but then the crew doesn't find out about it until later, like, towards the end of the book. And that was very interesting to read. It was very unique for me, and I really, really, really loved it. I'm very excited to read the rest of the series. I will say, at first, I was not totally sold on the relationships between certain characters, but certain things happen later that make it make sense. So, I was fully prepared to be like, this is ridiculous. And then I got to the point where it makes sense and I was like, oh, this is actually very interesting. So that's how I felt about that one. Then I read One in a Millennial by Katie Kennedy, which I was fully prepared to hate, but I liked it. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was cute. It's about, like, growing up, her, like, memories growing up as a millennial and how, like, it shaped her life, kind of. I've read a lot of books like this year, actually, I'm realizing, because I read 100 Things We Lost to the Internet, which was similar to this, because it was about, like, basically the 90s, which this is about, like, basically growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. But she talks about the internet quite a bit, about how, like, being a teenager when the internet was coming out, like, how you would work so hard to pick, like, the perfect tag for your MySpace or your aim away message, and you could, like, perfectly target it at someone, how, like, the rules, because there used to be, like, the 3-day phone rule, allegedly, for when you were allowed to call after a date, but now it was, like, if they saw you online and you sent them a message and they didn't respond, like, I don't know. I just think it's really interesting. It was cute. She talks about making mix CDs and stuff like that. So, like, a lot of it felt very nostalgic to my childhood. She's a little older than me, but, like, I've mentioned this before. I have older siblings, so I feel like I have a lot of, like, inherited nostalgia for things from my siblings, in the same way that, like, my parents were, like, teenagers in the 60s and 70s. Not in the 70s, I guess. They were teenagers in the 70s. So, like, a lot of 70s culture is, like, weirdly nostalgic to me, because that's the music that I grew up listening to, is, like, the late 70s. Whereas, like, I have a friend whose parents were teenagers in, like, the late 80s, early 90s. And so that's, like, the nostalgia for them. It's so funny to me every time I think about how young her parents are versus the age of my parents. Anyways, I just think, like, I have, like, retrospect, or what even is that? I have, like, inherited nostalgia is what I'm going to call it, for things that were not really my childhood, but, like, everyone talked about them so much that it felt like they were my childhood. Then I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. Wah wah, I gave this 3 stars. It's about this girl who works for a tech company who only really wants, like, to hook up with people. And then there's this guy who she meets on an app who's actually coming by to, like, destroy her tech company. And then they kind of have a hate to love, but it's not even that. They're, like, boning immediately, and then it turns into more romantic feelings later. Ali Hazelwood does say herself that this is more like erotica than it is, like, an actual traditional romance. There is, like, romantic feelings involved. This just wasn't for me, ultimately. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't dislike it. I thought it was fine, but I've loved the other Ali Hazelwood books that I've read. Anyways, then I read Victim by Andrew Borica. I gave this one 4 stars. I've been thinking about bumping it up to 5, though. This is about a guy who, it's like a satire book, okay? It was nominated for the fiction category. And the debut, I think. But it's about this guy who, when he's a teenager, his dad is a drug dealer and has always been, like, away from his house. He's Hispanic, and he grew up, like, in this kind of, like, impoverished neighborhood. And when he's in high school, his guidance counselor basically tells him that, like, he can get special treatment if he victimizes himself. Like, he doesn't say it like that, but that's how it's interpreted. And then from then on, he starts, like, leaning into this, like, victim mentality. And it's just things get, like, ramped up and ramped up and ramped up. And it's very much a commentary on, I don't know, the way that I feel like white Americans always interpret people of color as, like, playing the victim card. And it just really leans into that narrative. And it's so interesting the way that it all pans out and how things happen. I really, really enjoyed this book. He's got, like, this long relationship with this girl who's, like, I think she's half Hispanic, half white, and she's very much like, I can't believe, like, I'm half white, like, my dad's white, blah, blah, blah. And she ends up coming from, like, she, like, acts very much like she's, I don't know, like, not from the streets, but, like, she, like, plays into the Hispanic side of herself. And then when he meets her family, he's like, oh, you are nothing like my family. But also, you know nothing about what it's like growing up in, like, Harlem, in, like, a less rich area. And it was fascinating. I really love this book. Maybe I should bump it up to 5 stars. But I would definitely reread it. And also, it gets really intense because, like, he's lying about things. And that's the craziest part, is, like, he keeps lying and lying and lying and lying. And you're waiting for his lies to catch up with him. And oh boy, do they. Fascinating. Then I read Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdal. Didn't rate this one. It's another, like, self-help book where people are really rich and they're like, yeah, I'm really rich, but money didn't make me happy. And he basically says, like, if you can turn your job into a game, you might have more fun. And stuff like that. And I just feel like it's not practical advice. Like, maybe for little things. I can't remember what it was, but there was something that he said that I was like, I could see how that could be useful. One of the things was, like, time blocking your day, which everyone ever has said that. And I don't know if other people work in a job where you can time block your day. I do not. I work in a job where I'm playing catch up at all hours of the day and nights and weekends. So, like, I don't know. I didn't rate it. It's fine. It is what it is. I read it, but there you go. Then I read Antibot by Sierra Greer. I gave this one 4 stars as well. This is another really hyped book this year. It's a sci-fi book. It's about this sex doll, basically. It's an AI, like humanoid female doll who, a robot, I guess, not doll, but she is owned by this guy who's just terrible, and he thinks he's such a good guy, and he talks about being such a good guy, and it drove me nuts. So like I was feeling rage for a lot of this book, but basically basically the robot is becoming more human-like and getting more human thoughts and emotions, and she's starting to like hide things, and then you're just wondering where it's gonna go. And for me, like, I understand the ending. It was not satisfying for me. So that's why this got 4 stars. Honestly, for a lot of the book, I thought I was going to get 3 stars. I thought about DNFing this book. It was making me like sick to my stomach. I was really not enjoying it. But like I just in a sick way wanted to know more. So anyways, that was Antibot. Fascinating. Truly fascinating. Then I read Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek, which is another YA fantasy book. And I hate to say it, gave this 3 stars. I don't remember anything about it. So I'm just going to move on. I don't even know what it was about. Couldn't tell you. I can't believe I finished that book because I really have no memory of it. What was that one? Maybe it'll come to me and I'll come back if it does. Then I read Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This one I gave 4 stars again. It's about siblings whose mother, I think, has just died. And they've got all these like childhood family secrets. And one of them they learn about when they're going through their mom's house, like going through her stuff. They find a videotape that has something on it. And it turns their whole worlds upside down. And then the story goes from there. I thought this was really good. It was a very, like, rompy time for me. I enjoyed it. I felt like Geneva Rose did a good job of, like, having very heavy subject matter, but also being, like, haha, like, light about it and, like, having lighthearted moments. I also quite enjoyed the twist because I feel like so often with books like this, you end up with a twist that's, like, so out of left field that it's, like, bizarre. And the twist in this one was perfectly guessable. And I love that. Like, it wasn't obvious, but it was likely. And I think that makes a great twist. I think other people don't like it for that reason. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. Then I read Bits and Pieces by Whoopi Goldberg. I gave this 5 stars for the audio alone. The actual book, I think if I'd read it, I don't think I would have liked it, but Whoopi reads the audio, and she's so fucking funny. So I had a great time with this. This is Whoopi Goldberg memoir, sorry. And it's about growing up with her mom and her brother and like her life. I didn't know Whoopi Goldberg was a teen mom. I also didn't know she was a teen mom who essentially didn't raise her child and let her mother do it. Fascinating to me. Apparently her mom was also institutionalized for a number of years when she was a teenager, so she just lived with her brother as her custodian, I guess. She kind of glosses over all of that in the book. But she talks, her brother and her mom are both deceased now, but she talks a lot about how, like, her memories, like, her childhood was not, like, the conventional, like, great childhood, but how her family made it so special for her. And, like, it was also fascinating to know, like, who her dad was. Her dad was actually gay, and that's why her parents weren't together anymore, and he never made an effort to see her. But she has no resentment for him, or at least none in this book, which I think is just so, like, interesting. I don't know. I really liked her attitude about everything. And I hate to be like, you have to have a good attitude even if you have a shitty upbringing. But like, it really did make me like pause and think about my outlook on things because she was able to be like, yep, this is what happened. And I turned out fine anyways. And here we are. And I, you know, this and that. And I just really like, I don't know. I love that for her. Also, I didn't know she'd been married like 3 or 4 times. So that's fun. Whoopi Goldberg, everybody. I think if you could read this as an audiobook, I think that's the way to go. I don't know that I would do anything for you if you read it physically because there's not like anything groundbreaking in there, but it was fun. I don't know. I like Whoopi Goldberg well enough. So I had a good time with this one. Hi. I talked about several books after this, but I just realized that Bits and Pieces is the last book that I read in November. So that's where I'm wrapping this up at. I don't know how many books that is. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. I read 23 books in the month of November. That is a lot more than I thought I would have read. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and how you felt about them. Also, let me know what you read in November. Let me know if you voted in the Goodreads Choice Awards. What did you vote for? Do you think there's anything else that was nominated that I should read or anything that got snubbed that you think I should read? Let me know. And I am trying to post 2 videos every week. I'm not doing it, but I'm trying, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!